Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. I'm your host, Christian Russell, alongside the Center Square's Tim Klauser, here today to talk about Spokane County's residents possibly facing a sales tax hike. Tim, what's going on?
Yeah, so the Spokane County, it's facing a 25 million, sorry, let me correct myself, $30 million general fund deficit ahead of 2027. In the last few weeks, the county's senior director of finance and administration, Jeff McMorris, he had placed the deficit at around 20 to $25 million. In a meeting earlier this week, he raised that figure to $30 million. And the county's faced structural gaps the last few years. They balanced $20 million deficits heading into 2025 and 2026. So this isn't much of a surprise, but the difference is in the last few years, they've kind of relied on cutting vacancies and other minor areas, what you would call the fat of a budget to avoid detrimental service cuts. And that fat's just not there anymore. So now they're facing some difficult decisions ahead of next year. And the sheriff's office, the courts, these law and justice departments in general make up the vast majority of the county's spending. And then when you look at that further, a lot of that money is spent on salaries and benefits. So the sheriff's office mentioned earlier this week that they could be looking at a major staff reduction next year unless they come up with some more money. So a sales tax hike could be one of those options. They're exploring this tax hike that was created through a state law passed in 2025 that also opens them up to this grant program. So they haven't approved the tax hike yet. They just sent an application to the state to qualify for that grant program, and they'll get back to them and say whether or not they can implement this tax hike. They can do it before the state gets back to them, but if the state comes back and says you don't qualify, they could face some issues in terms of what they do with that money afterwards. But right now, it's looking like they could be passing a sales tax hike in the next few weeks or months ahead of 2027. And the sheriff himself, John Knowles, he told them, look, I understand how difficult this might be politically, but if I were you, I would take the risk. And he said they're pretty much weighing whether or not to raise their response times 25 to 30%, cut dozens of sheriff deputies. In the sheriff's office would just be one part of that. This tax would go towards the courts and just criminal justice spending in general. So the cuts that were explained earlier this week are just one piece of the problem. But at the same time, the budget bloat comes on the backs of local taxpayers. So they could be seeing their sales tax rate go up here in the next few weeks, the same time as several other local jurisdictions, Spokane County included, are considering whether or not to put additional property and sales tax proposals on the August and November ballots. So a bit of a tension there. The county commissioners mentioned during their meeting this week that, they are creating somewhat of a risk that voters might reject those tax increases on the ballot over the next few months if they pass the sales tax hike without voter approval to balance the budget ahead of 2027. At the same time, the money that the sales tax hike would bring, it'd be 14 to 17 million dollars on a really good year. That's only half of the budget hole. So even if they pass the sales tax measure, they could be looking at other tax and fee hikes to close the deficit or major cuts.
So now, with public opinion in focus here, what does polling suggest? I know you cite in your article some polling data. What does the public perception on a sales tax hike look like?
Yeah, so Greater Spokane Incorporated, they're kind of Spokane's chamber of commerce, if you'd say. And they've done polling kind of quarterly over the last 2 years that looks at sentiment in terms of how people view safety downtown, overall spending, but it's kind of split. It mainly looks at the city of Spokane and the city of Spokane Valley. And then there's quite a few county voters in there as well. But the county and the cities are largely intertwined. I mean, it's one big area. It's hard to tell you're going from one to another unless you're in a really unincorporated rural area. But essentially, this polling suggests that, a lot of people are considering moving out of the Spokane region. And in doing so, they cited high taxes and government leadership as some of the main reasons for wanting to move. And There's also some notes in those polls, the surveys that say, "Hey, we think the city is not the county." It says the cities in the report. The cities have enough tax dollars to balance spending and to fund their priorities, and that they don't think they need to raise taxes. And again, those are in reference to the city, not the county in particular. But it kind of just shows where taxpayer sentiment is right now in the Spokane region, considering how closely aligned, or maybe not aligned, but intertwined these regions are with the different activities that they engage in, the services that they fund, and their overall coordination.
And now Josh Kearns was the only member to vote against sending this to the ballot. What's his stance on this?
Yeah, well, generally, Spokane County, and you could say Spokane Valley too, compared to the city of Spokane, they're generally more tax conscious. Yeah, they have budget issues, but they have a lot of reserves set aside, at least in terms of the valley. And they're more so willing to cut spending than to raise taxes. So the idea that they have a $30 million deficit and they might have to raise taxes to balance spending isn't resting well with a lot of people, especially Commissioner Kearns, and I believe Commissioner Al French too, although he wasn't at the meeting this week. So Kearns is trying to weigh being physically responsible in passing a balanced budget, and also remaining kind of a somewhat of a tax haven compared to the other surrounding regions. I mean, the city of Spokane, they've turned to tax hikes to close deficits over the last 2 years. Uh, Spokane Valley voters passed a tax hike last year to fund additional police services, and they're kind of heading into a tough budget season as well. Um, but it kind of just shows Kern's vote was kind of just symbolic of where the county is at in general. I mean, you have the Board of County Commissioners. There's 5 people on it. Um, 3 of them are kind of more so conservative. You have 2 Democrats on there. So there's somewhat of a shift in balance. French wasn't there. He's one of the conservative Republicans. So you had Kearns being the lone vote against, kind of representing that sector, and then you had Commissioner Mary Brooks, the chair, who's also a conservative, siding with the 2 Democrats to send this application to the state. And again, this application doesn't mean that they're raising taxes yet, but uh, it puts it right in front of them as an option that they could exercise. Will they? We don't know yet. But there are a lot of concerns popping up in the community that their tax rate could be going up right before they also have to consider approving several other tax measures that would also raise the cost of living.
So what's the next steps in this process then for anybody watching in Spokane or just the greater Washington area interested in when this will go down possibly? What's going to happen next and how is that going to play out?
Yeah, well, now the county's waiting to get its application back from the State's Criminal Justice Training Commission, which will say whether or not it qualifies for this grant program underneath the state law that created this local option sales tax hike. But that doesn't stop them from imposing the sales tax hike in the meantime. I mean, they could come back in the next few weeks and approve it, or they could do it closer to next year. They just need to pass a balanced budget ahead of 2027. That usually happens in November or December. So we're likely to see a decision before then, but there's no stopping from the county from trying to impose this now, because there will be several months before it starts collecting revenue. So the longer they wait, the longer it could be until they get money back, which will also affect future budget negotiations. But the county, the cities, they're all getting into their annual budget processes right now. And that's likely to continue into the fall and winter, like I said. So there's just a lot up in the air right now.
All right, well, Tim will definitely keep an eye on this story. And for everybody watching at home, please be sure to check out Tim's story at thecentersquare.com Washington page. Thank you for watching.